Yeah. That's fine. Awesome, and we're live. Sorry for being a few minutes, 4 minutes late. I'm privileged to have Mark Beebe with me today. I think this is your third time, Mark, if I'm not mistaken.
Definitely second, maybe third, yeah.
Cool. I'm looking forward to today's discussion because I think it's a area that's very important, and I think many of us actually don't quite know. So maybe we'll get some new insights out of the conversation also. So we're going to talk about, well, one of the things that Mark and I agree on is that if you innovate, it must be outcomes based. So it's pointless to innovate if a customer doesn't benefit. The question though is, how do you measure that value? And we can also talk a little bit about how do you know what that customer value is and so forth. So welcome, Mark. Thank you. You got a thing or two to say. Remember to unmute yourself.
Thanks.
Just a reminder, the format has changed. We're now down to 30 minutes, so time flies.
We shall not ramble on too much then, Johan. You and I have a tendency to do that, both of us, even more so when we get together. Your audio is a little bit muffled. I'm not sure if it's my headset or if it's your microphone, but I was struggling a little bit to hear you. Now I seem to have lost Johan, so perhaps I can carry on talking while I wait for him to rejoin. Let me see if I can get hold of Johan. So it looks like Johan might be returning. So while we're waiting for Johan to return, I will introduce myself, Mark Beebe.
Yeah, myself.
Okay,
now you should hear me okay.
That's much better, thank you.
Yeah, sorry for that. I had to do a full refresh.
Okay. Your audio is much better now, so better for me and hopefully for the other listeners as well.
Awesome. So Candice, welcome. Jim, welcome. So I can see some people on LinkedIn. There is a report that there's issues with Facebook. So if you're on Facebook and you want to participate, maybe scoot over to LinkedIn and join the event there. Sorry, Mark, I just remembered. Squirrel.
That's okay. We both have squirrel mentality, and sometimes we're chasing the same thing, sometimes something different.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. No worries, all good. So I was just about to start introducing myself while you were off the call for a minute there.
Okay, go for it.
So Mark Beebe, my background is varied in terms of doing different things in predominantly in the technology space, in different industries, banking, insurance, most recently education, consulting to various different companies as well. when I say education, higher education specifically. But I think there's some common things and themes, whether you're talking about managing services as a continual delivery, whether you're working in an agile environment and delivering in a more product-based approach to things, as a way of continual improvement and continual delivery, or in fact, if you're more old school way of doing large programs where you're replacing something big, whether it's core technology or something that's a lot more customer facing. In all of those different environments that I've worked in, and different types of projects, different types of services and products being delivered, I think common theme there is, how do we ensure that we're getting the value that we need? How does the organization ensure it's getting the value from it? Now, in the old days, a lot of that was based around, are we getting the financial benefits of doing a piece of work? But quite often there are a lot of other benefits that are way beyond the financial, that need to be understood, that need to be measured, and different parties want to understand different things of that. They have different aspects that matter to them. And I think when Johan and I spoke last week, we were brainstorming a few ideas about what should we talk about in this session, because we both have quite eclectic and wide-ranging interests. So we landed on this as an interesting topic.
Okay, so all of the benefits that projects or initiatives brings must create value for somebody. How do you know what that value is?
Start by asking.
Okay, and if I use the argument that Henry Ford used, that when he said if you asked his customers what they wanted, they would have told them faster horses.
Yes, and I think that works in an environment where you have something that is disruptive innovation, but where you have something that is more evolutionary and incremental. Does that still hold true?
I don't know. My experience is that customers quite often tell you what they think they want, and they think they want it because other people have it. But when you give it to them, they say, no, that's not what we want. So it seems like it's much easier to know what you don't want than what you know than to know what you want. And I think that's one of the reasons why we put so much emphasis in ADAPT on the issue of helping customers quantifying and clarifying their needs better. So I wonder how much of the deliverables that we do for projects that costs millions and billions and whatever are actually just busy work. I know it's a lot. I haven't had the opportunity to try and quantify it because, unfortunately, I try and keep myself out of the project and program off. Yeah. So, I mean, lately you've been working in an environment where there's a stated desire to be agile. So, has the organization made the shift from project to product? Do they understand that it's different?
Yeah, so I think there's certainly different parts of the organization that do things in a agile, more product-driven way, and I think that's really good. But I think there's also parts of the organization that are not delivering in that way, and quite often, and I think it's probably representative of many organizations where often IT, and this is just observation rather than saying something about IT, but observationally IT seems to drive more towards working in an agile way, and you may find that, I don't know, estates, for example, tends to work in a more waterfall way, and that doesn't seem to be. I mean, that seems to be true across a number of industries, in my observation, as well as other people that I've spoken to.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean that's a fundamental problem, because project is basically delivering a bunch of things on a list until they're all done, and then we're finished, whether the customer likes it or not. I'm being a little bit facetious, but I think to a large extent it's actually true.
I would hope that you're delivering what you agreed to deliver with the customer at the beginning. But I get your point, sometimes those aren't.
Yeah. But the argument is, if the customer didn't know in the beginning of the conversation
what they wanted.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the higher the level of the customer, the more I find the conversation goes along these lines. We really want to be, and I'm going to use a bunch of words that I know are BS words, best of breed. And therefore, we've looked around in the industry, and the people who seems to be leading the industry is doing, let's choose a technology, SAP. And we've evaluated this, and we believe that SAP is the best solution for us. Yeah, it scales across a whole organization. There's modules for everything that we do, and we've done a costing exercise, and we believe the benefits is going to be X, and those benefits, incidentally, are based on what the salesperson told them. And the costs are also based on what the software salesperson told them, and not what the hardware or the cloud software the salesperson will tell them if they actually have that conversation. And then that's it. The decision is made. Budget is given. Thou shalt. And then it all turns to, muck. How do you prevent that? I mean, how would you tackle that conversation with a CXO in terms of bearing in mind that, these are senior and powerful people, so you can't tell them directly that they don't know what they're talking about. Or, sorry, you should not. Some of us do.
That's severely limiting to that.
Yeah. So that was not a rhetorical question, though. Yeah, it's
No, I get your point, though. Is that it's often about ensuring that we're talking about things in a lot more simple terms, and trying to understand what is it that will be the real result for the end customer, right? And not talking about it in terms of saying, oh, we're going to make this process that much more efficient, or we're going to automate this, or we're going to digitize that, right? But actually, if we talk about it in terms that are real for the person engaging with that, and you start with that and say, okay, this person needs to get from A to B, how can we make that happen in the most seamless and painless way possible for that customer, user, whatever terminology you want to use. And understanding why they need to get from A to B rather than the how. If you end up being really focused on the technology or the methodology or the framework or whatever, then you tie yourself up in knots arguing about that rather than saying, well, hang on, there's something that needs to be done here for someone. Who is the someone? What do they need to do? Starting there.
And I think even more importantly is to say, what does success look like?
Yeah.
I mean, getting back to our topic, the issue of metrics. If this project, and remember, only projects can finish Product management never finishes. So agile never finishes.
Sometimes
once
projects wind down into and morph into being an ongoing
into oblivion. Yeah.
yeah.
But in a period of time, what is the metric that you're going to use to measure the success? Because then you can sort of have a more engaging and open and intelligent conversation. So if the CFO tells you, we expect the revenue to be up by, or our cost to be down by, or the marketing person telling you that we'll have so many more customers or whatever. But often we don't, because, and I think part of the problem is that we don't because as people who's predominantly talking to IT, the people that we talk to, hello Kinder, actually don't have that insight either. Yeah. To know what it is. So I suppose the next question then is, how do we engage with those people that we're talking to, helping them get the right answers? Is there something that we can do there?
I think there's ways and means to have those conversations, and the methodologies you and I have spoken about. I know that you talk about quite extensively as well. That focus on the result, but also then how do you measure the outcome around that, and identifying the things that really matter. So if we go back to the Henry Ford example of faster horses, let's rather say, what is it that we want to do? The individual wants to get from point A to point B, and they want to perhaps be able to carry more than a horse can carry as well. It's about rethinking things without talking about that solution, and then also being able to measure those and saying, well, what are the things that we want to measure that matter? Then you can work backwards, really, into understanding all of the different aspects that need to make that happen, whether that's a process or whether it's a workflow or a technology, etc., that needs to be put in place for that result. But I think it's about asking the why questions, asking the continual digging through into the next level, the next level, the next level, until you get to that answer of what it is. Similar to the approach of when you trying to fault find and you ask why, the 7 whys approach. What are your thoughts
and
on
I
that?
think so. I'm just posting something in the chat. 2 things that I think at a lower level, the conversation. One of the tools that I find is very helpful is job theory, or jobs to be done.
Yeah.
So that helps us at the lowest possible level in the organization understand what it is that somebody's trying to achieve and how they're trying to achieve it without us talking about our product or technology or whatever. And the interesting thing about jobs is jobs are timeless. Since the beginning of man, there was a job called satisfy hunger, and it hasn't changed in millennia.
Indeed.
The challenge is, though, what if this is a more integrated thing and it's actually across the organization and more strategic? And I think there we need to understand how our objectives and needs basically cascade through the organization. And there's a lean technique called Hoshin Kanri, which to my mind are an awesome tool set to help us actually understand at a strategic level what the organization wants to achieve, and then break it down into eventually what an individual needs to do to contribute towards those goals and objectives. Now, for those of you that saying yes, but Ocean Country means policy cascade. Yeah, I don't know why Toyota used the word policy, but if you actually go and see what they do, it's not policy; it's a goals cascade. Um, so that's a very interesting concept to be able to say, okay, at a high level to the organization, yeah, what are the things that you want to achieve, and do that as the executive or the directors of the organization from the different perspectives of the role players. So, Mr. CEO, what do you want to see at the end of this, Mr. CXO or Mrs. CXO, or person, uh, marketing executive, sales executive, or whatever? Um, yeah, what would you like to see out of this? And then help them to be able to translate that into things that IT need to do, and HR needs to do, and sales needs to do, and product management needs to do, and support needs to do, and logistics needs to do, and facilities needs to do. Because at the end of the day, if what we're doing as an individual do not contribute towards the goals and objectives of the organization, it's most probably wrong. And then it brings me to the next thing that I want to add is, yeah, don't have goals that conflicts with your purpose, because that will also destroy and distract value within the organization. So, so that means what do we start with? What's it? 2009, the Red Book from Simon Sinek came out with the title "Start with Why."
Start with why, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
and as many times as I read that, I always find something new in it that kind of works for me.
I have
You go
shown
through
this.
go through it again and again.
Yeah, I've shown this before. There's a cool book.
Find Your Why.
Find Your Why. This is a
Excellent, isn't it?
workbook.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you and your organization are struggling with the concept of a corporate why or an organizational why, the workbook will help you to work out a why for your organization, for your team, and for you as an individual.
Absolutely, but I think
Awesome resource.
you just touched on there is, it's not just a why of the organisation or of the individual, but it is why at a team level, at a product level, and so on and so forth. You can apply that and link it back to the whys elsewhere in the organisation.
Yeah,
and that can be really, really helpful in terms of prioritization, in terms of finding out what are the things that matter, and in terms of building out your approach to things as well.
Yeah. So here's another question that I'm going to throw into the pot. Quite often, change initiatives takes a long time because they're not easy, and by the time that the investor's patience with the CEO runs out, most probably the results of the change effort is still not seen. How can we help having a conversation about metrics that matters, and sharing those metrics with stakeholders so that we know it's not about this month's profitability or this quarter's profitability, but help organizations to start having a little bit more long-term strategic view of things to be done. Is there a way that we can do something like that?
I think it's about, you've touched on the conversation, and it's about having that conversation about what is the journey, right? And different phases of a journey are going to have different things that matter, but we'll still hopefully be working towards the same why at the end of the day. And understanding that, in an early adopter phase, for example, you want to be driving different metrics that you would when you have a more mature product. And the same could be said for a change initiative within an organization. you want to be achieving different things at different phases. So your awareness phase of what the change initiative is going to be different from later phases when you're starting to deliver and realize value.
But you say value, and the issue here is that value, often from a large institutional perspective with external stakeholders, are seen as pounds, dollars, euros, rands, and cents. How do we? How can we help our colleagues? Because most of us who actually listen to this podcast, our colleagues that we help are IT people. How can we help our colleagues to have more meaningful conversations with their stakeholders and customers?
And well, that is one of the long-standing challenges of IT is tying back all of this money that IT consumes back to value for the customer, value for the business, and being able to measure and show that really, really matters. And I think, non-IT people often struggle with really grasping the foundations that are required to deliver this, right? And it's about building that story that says, here are the foundation pieces that build on top and on top and on top to deliver that value and that outcome. And I think quite a lot of the time in IT, from what we've seen, is that there isn't that visualization and that view and that linkage of what is happening at the foundation layers all the way through to the outcomes that are delivered. But also, I think there's, if we're going back to the financial metrics, if there's not the transparency in terms of what IT is doing, then there's suspicion in terms of what they're doing, in terms of, are you being prudent, are you being financially responsible with how you're spending the money? So it's about defining metrics through a dependency chain, as it were, to link back, hey, doing this, moving this to the cloud is going to show these benefits down the line, right? Tying those things together in a multi-dimensional way.
And the interesting thing about Ocean Country is that every level that you cascade down, one of the things that you talk about is your KPIs for that level. So once again, I think it's an awesome tool. My experience is that IT people just desperately want the money, and therefore they're not going to rock the boat and actually tell people, but don't measure the success of this thing like that. There's a better way of doing it, number one. And number two, if you actually go look at previous projects, the metrics were bullshit in any case, because we never made them in any case. So it's just to have that easy conversation at the beginning. And I think maybe it's high time that we start having the difficult conversations in the beginning, so that we can have an easier road to success down the line. Have you read anything of any of Jonathan Smart's stuff?
I can't say I have, no.
So for those in the audience, unfortunately, I've got a audiobook, so I can't show you the cover. Better, sooner, safer. This is most probably the most fundamental success guidance that I've seen around agility. So an absolute must for anybody's bookshelf. So I'm listening to the audio version at the moment, but unfortunately Amazon in South Africa is not open yet. So it takes 2 weeks for me to get a book from the States. I can't wait to start scratching in my book. So because my books are workbooks. If I can't write in them, they're useless. Okay. Anything? We're up to a half an hour. Can you believe how quickly it goes?
I know, it goes very fast, doesn't it?
So the reason why we've changed it from an hour to a half an hour, people kept on telling me that they can't do an hour on the treadmill, but they can do half an hour on the treadmill, and most of them listen to this post factor.
Yeah.
If there are any questions that the audience wants to ask, then let me just quickly share my and Mark's contact details. A window, and do reach out. I don't profess to have all of the answers, and I don't think Mark do either, but we're happy to engage and have a conversation and help you work through your specific issue. So, before I do that, remember the previous session I had to cancel because Doug had a crisis. So just bear in mind that in 2 weeks' time, Doug is back, and we'll catch up on that conversation. Mark, all of this information current and
looks right,
usable.
Yep.
Okay, so just bear in mind you can always go back to the podcast on YouTube after the fact, and go and watch any of the episodes, and check out Mark's contact detail there. To get a hold of me, well, okay, that's the podcast, the Get It podcast. That's how you'll get to it. And just for listening, and in case you haven't done so yet, there's a code for you to download Competing in the Digital Future, 2nd edition, for free. In December, we're going to start writing the 3rd edition, and then I'll start charging you again. It's amazing how the guidance changed in a year's time. Yeah, but there's still some good stuff in here, so please go ahead, download it, and enjoy it.
Well, both version 1 and version 2 were great, so I'm looking forward to version 3.
Yeah, and Mark, remember you committed to be involved in the rewrite this time around. So you did with the first and the second version. So thank you for that.
Yes.
And last closing remarks, maybe?
No, I think that it's about understanding a set of principles and following those principles, because every situation is going to be different, right? Get your playbook together, and focus on using that to understand those outcomes for the user. But if you focus on outcomes, you build things based on outcomes, takes away a lot of the arguments that sometimes can happen at the lower levels. When you focus on outcomes, then you get a lot less arms around things, and you can focus more on delivering the results for the user or customer.
Okay, just to make it easier, what I'm going to quickly do, but you have to copy and paste this before the session is done. So sorry, if you're listening on Facebook, you're not going to see this because I've just got a notification that the Facebook posts aren't coming through or going through. So if you go to Smashworks, books, view that code, and you use that code, you can download the book for free. Incidentally, it's only a EPUB version that you can download for free. Please don't send me a mail and say the PDF version doesn't work. There isn't the PDF version. Awesome. Mark, thank you very much for your time once again.
Thank you, Johan, for having me on your show.
Awesome insights. So remember, safer, happier, sooner. I think that's the title, Jonathan Smart. And another book that, although it's an old book already, I'm a big Simon Sinek fan, so let me just change to full screen view. Start thinking long term. There's a lot of things that we can't do in the tenure of one person. So let's start preparing the messages and preparing our stakeholders also for longer term thinking. Awesome.
Good stuff.
Stay well, everyone. Mark, if you can just stay online for the what do you call it, a wash off or whatever. I'm going to enter the stream now.
All right.